You can trace back all these issues back to the French and the British and back in the World Wars and Sykes-Picot Agreement of dividing up Palestine and the Zionism and all that. But somebody interestingly mentioned, it takes 3 generations to forget about a conflict. Has it been 3 generations yet? Probably not yet.
No.
Yeah, because the wounds are fresh, and either you're one of the families whose kid got killed in the October 7th attack, or one of the Gazan families that got in the way of the Israeli army attack. You think they're going to forget about these things?
Gotta be there, I'm losing my cool, I'm on the edge, something's taking over me, I'm gonna be down on my knees, you know I'm ready for this, you keep me begging for this.
This is the Ocio Show with Rahul, where I have deep conversations with interesting people on topics that are meaningful, slightly personal, and perhaps controversial.
Roll with this. I could do this all day. I could do this all day. Back up, I'ma run this town. I'm headed for the top and you know it's going down.
Welcome to the 7th episode of the Ocio Show with Rahul. I'm here with Arkady Itkin. Arkady, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So you're an employment lawyer.
Correct.
And how did you get into employment law?
I'm not only an employment law lawyer, I'm also deal with a lot of business litigation, business disputes, and also some personal injury cases. But the way I got into it is that I was looking for any job when I came to the U.S., knocking on doors, literally going door to door. And there was one law firm that was kind enough to take me, to adopt me, to teach me a bunch of things.
Like as a paralegal? Or?
Correct. And I worked there for 4 years. And during the time that I was going to college, and at the end of college, I'm like, I really like what I do. I like what I learned. Why not take it further?
And you came to U.S. as a high schooler, as a post-high school?
Right after serving in the army.
U.S. Army?
No, the Israeli.
Israeli Army. So
Correct.
you're a Israeli citizen as well, American citizen.
Correct.
Right. And then then after that you went to law school?
Correct.
At San Francisco or?
In Sacramento.
Sacramento. And
Yes.
then passed the bar. And was the firm that was you were paralegaling with, was that an employment law firm?
It was actually a personal injury law firm, but some of the fundamentals and some of the stuff that I learned there were very useful.
Or
Many other areas of civil litigation. And maybe that was my first experience of learning that what you learn on the job in one day is more valuable than you would learn in school in a whole semester.
Most of the people end up doing what they'd learned in their first job as a career, actually. So, and then you specialized in employment law while after you passed the bar?
Mostly with, again, a little bit of business litigation
Business.
and personal injury, but the focus is employment law. That's correct.
Got it. And what are the most common cases of employment law that you represent?
I think the most common cases are, well, by far, the single most common one is probably retaliation. Because
By the employer?
Correct. And I represent both employees and employers, so I see the perspective from both sides. But I think retaliation, which if you zoom out a little bit from the word, which is revenge, is so natural, is so primal to us as humans.
Yeah.
It happens all the time. Proving it is sometimes harder than others, but you see it in personal relationships, you see it at work, you see it in just about any aspect. When somebody does something to you, when someone steps on you, the impulse is to fight back.
Vengeance, right? Yeah.
Sometimes it's legal, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just unfair. And the second one would be, I guess, a disability violation, disability laws violations, and also some wage violations, because California has so many rules, so many intricacies. It's so easy to trip up and violate one or more laws.
Annoyingly too sometimes, huh?
Yes. Yes.
And you're qualified to practice in California?
Correct.
Yeah. And these and what kind of stuff do you get involved with the employer generally? Are these same sort of cases or?
Yes, so I generally defend employers, and employers being served with a lawsuit for unpaid overtime, unpaid wages, misclassification, wrongful termination. They're stressed out. They don't know what to do, what to expect, how much it's going to cost. So that's where I come in to calm them down, to tell them that, in California, it's part of the business, and let's take it step by step, try to resolve it the easy way. If it doesn't work, we'll do what we have to do.
Yeah. So, California is one of those very employee-friendly states. So has it been, like, in your experience, difficult to be an employer here to cross all the T's and dot all the I's with respect to employees and contractors?
So absolutely. First of all, this whole thing about employees and contractors, if I put myself in the employer's shoes, is very frustrating. The government, the law here doesn't allow me to hire contractors, even if my workers want and prefer to be contractors. So this basic...
This is the AB5 Uber driver dispute that's coming up again.
Exactly. And there's a lot of modifications. There's a lot of lobbying going on to make exceptions. But generally the fact that you cannot be a contractor, even if you want to, along with some strange overtime laws and maybe even minimum wage. Some people argue, why do we even have minimum wage? So there are a lot of restrictions on freedoms.
But just
Sure.
I can hire a contractor, right, in my business or in California?
Well, because you have this ABC rule, most people would not fall into that rule. If the
what's the rule generally that you cannot hire a contractor?
So the general rule is, in order for your worker to be properly classified as a contractor, where you can pay them by W-9 and not through W-2, there's an ABC test. They have to satisfy 3 requirements. One of them is that you should not be controlling the manner of their work, when they work, their schedule. That's the first one. And the second one is that they cannot be an extension of your business. So, for example, if you have a recruiting company, your recruiters cannot be your contractors because they are...
They're the core part of your job.
Your copy machine maintenance person can be a contractor because his job has nothing to do with the recruiting. There's a third element which I'm not going to get into, but this second element is nearly impossible to satisfy for most businesses. So if you have a trucking company, and you have a bunch of truck drivers, they're an extension of your business.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and also if you're, let's say, a tutoring company and you have a bunch of freelance tutors coming in, tutoring, is that a... Yeah.
You tell me. Unless there's an exception, how could they possibly not be an extension of your business?
Which also, it's actually detrimental to the workers too, I believe, right? In some capacity. I understand why they've done it, to protect the workers, but the very rule that's protecting the workers sometimes is harming them too.
My girlfriend cannot get a job, cannot get, as a recruiter, she cannot get contracts with so many different companies out of state because they're concerned that even if they agree with her, one day she's going to come back and say, oh, you misclassified me, you owe me overtime, you owe me minimum wage, unpaid meal and rest breaks. So they don't want to take a risk. So the problem with protecting a worker is you're not protecting them if you don't leave them a choice.
Yeah, I mean, it should be their choice to do it. But can she say that, hey, I give up my right to be an employee and I'm just being a contractor? And is that because she lives in California? That's...
Let me give you 2 examples. Somebody comes to you and says, I know that there's a $20 minimum wage, but I'm happy to work for you for $5 an hour. I will sign. That person
it's not applicable in the courts.
That person can come back a year later and say, you owe me all these wages, because that agreement will be against public policy. And there are a few other examples, significant examples of that. But that, along with contractors and employees distinction, falls into that category. Agreement doesn't mean that they cannot make a claim against you.
And what kind of stuff do employees generally win in these employment disputes? Do you need to have a smoking gun of like an email from their boss that says, I'm firing you because you're pregnant or one of these things? Or but do these happen generally in these cases?
So the reason most cases settle is because it's not black and white, like with car accidents. You hit me, it's your fault. Now the only question is, how much.
How much, yeah.
Here, the intent is always
Matters, yeah.
questionable, right? We're not mind readers. Did you terminate me because I complained about harassment or because of my performance because I
yeah.
was late, or both? 3 minutes. So you don't see smoking gun very often. Sometimes you do, and it really helps. But generally, the employee's job, the attorney who represents the employee, his job is to gather as much evidence. To make it look like retaliation, discrimination was the reason. And in terms of what people win, it's an art, it's not a science. It depends on how hard you push, what you want out of the process. And the same with employers. You have large employers like Costco and Walmart who say, I'm going to fight. I don't care how much it's going to cost. I'm going to trial. Versus the other extreme, ask them what they want. I'll pay them. I just want them out of my system.
yeah.
And then you have in the middle.
Because I think some of the bigger employers, they feel that if they succumb to one, they'll have to succumb to a million.
Absolutely.
So they make it a standard to push back, especially the jurisdiction they select and all that. I think,
Absolutely.
Maybe elect favorable judges and pay for that, lobby it and pay it, all that, right? You are representing a vaccine issue, employer issue. Tell us more about that in San Francisco.
So when this whole thing about vaccine mandates started at work, outside of work, I felt very, very strongly
This
personally.
is
and
COVID 2020, 2021
Correct.
timeframe.
I felt very strongly that this was wrong on so many levels, that there has to be nuance. You cannot just tell everyone either get vaccinated or you're fired, regardless of what you do, who you work with. So
But the federal government did that, right? Like if you had
Right.
to travel outside of America, to come back to America, you had to get a vaccine,
Right.
So,
right.
yeah.
And the only angle legally we had is religion and disability.
So people were, just to make the case clear, there were a lot of firings by the county or the city or other agencies that because the fact that the employees were not vaccinated.
Correct.
And they
So
refused to vaccinate.
both private and public employers did this, right? Some were more strict about than others. But yes, hundreds of city and county of San Francisco employees were terminated after all of their religious exemption requests were denied. And I represent 12 or 13 of them right now.
Is that a class action or is that still separate cases?
So mine are separate cases. There are a couple of class actions going on at the same time. All of these cases are consolidated. I'm cautiously optimistic that something good will eventually come out of it. But I feel very strongly, and I don't think there's ever been in my lifetime a more important and more significant mission in terms of employee rights.
And what were these religious exemptions that people got for vaccines?
So the city has a policy, like most employers should, that under Title VII and under Fair Employment and Housing Act, you have the right to an accommodation for your religion. You have many employees with the city, especially black and brown employees, who are devout Christians. And for the same reasons that they cite from the Bible, they requested an exemption from being vaccinated. Many of them work in the field alone. Many of them worked throughout the whole time before the vaccines came about. And they wore masks, maybe they tested. So they requested an exemption, and almost all of them, or nearly all of them, were fired after a long career with the city.
Got it. And and are they fired with compensation or without compensation? And now, so they've never gone back to work with the city still?
So if you were reinstated quietly, some moved on. They just said, you know what, I don't want to deal with it.
I'm thankful that they gave me my job back and I'm going to not lay low.
Some did not get their job back, and they just moved away out of state. Some retired if they were close enough for retirement and they just don't feel like dealing with it. And quite a few people are fighting back now.
Yeah. And did the governments and agencies and private did they break the law when they did that?
So that always is a
According to you.
fact-specific question.
Yeah. Judge has to decide, but ultimately.
According to me, if you're an emergency room nurse who is working with high-risk, vulnerable patients, and the employer denied your request for exemption, and there's really nothing they could do for you to accommodate your religious beliefs, then it's probably not a legal violation. It's understandable why the employer will
So
do
they
it.
were trying to protect the people coming into the hospital.
Right. And some nurses will argue against what I just
Yeah.
said. And they would say that, hey, again, I worked with these patients for a year every day with a mask and being tested. Everything was fine. Right. But the argument that the employer can make there is much stronger than an argument with remote employees who they force to be vaccinated. What do you care if a person who continues to work remotely is vaccinated? That's absurd, and believe it or not, it happened a lot. Or sanitation workers or other blue-collar workers that worked in the field by themselves, never came to the office. What do you care if they're vaccinated? At all. After you've already learned that vaccines don't really do much, but even leaving that aside, those were the people who should have been accommodated, and they weren't.
And these firings came all the way from the top? Like, who mandated these firings? Was this a certain city government or county government that decided to carte blanche do this? Or is it, like, how do they like just pay, do this or get fired sort of
So I
mandate?
do believe that, like with large organizations, especially public entities, there is a bureaucracy, there is a committee, and like you said, carte blanche. We don't care about anything, any circumstances.
This is there's like blind adherence to the policy, basically.
Blind adherence, just like
Not
they-
just a vendetta, but there's like blind adherence.
No,
to
we
the
don't care
policy.
about any circumstances. This is our policy. You don't get vaccinated by date X. We're putting you on leave, and then we're terminating you.
Yeah.
No questions asked.
I mean, what do you say about the counter arguments people have on, hey, vaccinations are, save lives and good for people, sort of thing, right? For these, for the greater good of society, sort of thing. Huh? I'm sure that's the argument probably the other side is using for some of these cases. What do they?
So, first of all, these cases, and for us who represent employees, it's important not to make it about science, but to make it about your religious liberty, your Title VII rights. But we know that vaccines don't prevent transmission. And we've known this for a long time. So just knowing that alone and still pushing this on people, not simply making it available, but mandating it under the threat of losing a job is despicable and unexcusable, in my opinion.
How many? Do you have a idea of scale of this? How many people were affected by this? How many people were fired? How many people were let go because of these vaccine mandates? Let's say in San Francisco.
So I think many, many hundreds, maybe over 1,000. During the times when they're all crying about shortage of employees and how we don't have enough workers, I can only speak about how many plaintiffs there are. There are quite a few hundred plaintiffs, but there are plenty of people who decided not to pursue.
Got it. This is So we'll see where the case ends up. What's the most interesting employment law case you've ever worked on?
I would have to talk again about vaccine, about denial of exemption cases. You have people who did an amazing job for 15, 20 years, exceeded expectations, received great performance reviews, and their life has been derailed by these moronic, nonsensical mandates, which were completely unnecessary, where the employer did not stop for a moment and ask themselves, what am I doing? Is this really the right thing to do? Remember, this wasn't an accident. This whole thing was going on for months. Employers had time to decide, to figure out what to do. Am I really going to dismiss this top pharmacist or this top salesman because he is asking for something that he's entitled to by law? So I really like these cases where, quote unquote, where a worker's life and career has been derailed by this. And you may have noticed from the news about Navy SEALs who were fighting back and different people in the military who were fighting against the vaccine mandates. It's very important to people. These people would not budge. They would lose everything before they budge. It's important to them for religious, for personal reasons. It's part of who they are.
So besides vaccines, is there still a lot of employer lawsuits in terms of harassment going on these days, or like is that because with all the Me Too movements and all of that, is that a thing of the past, or is it still very active in your
So what really
case and-
frustrates me, and where I almost am helpless, is, and everyone is at a risk of this. Bless you. Everyone is at a risk. Somebody accuses someone else at work of whatever, harassment. It could be sexual. It could be threat of violence. Oh, he hit me, or he told me something inappropriate. And then the person who is being accused, the employee or the manager who is being accused, says, this never happened. I didn't do any of that. And the employer has to decide who to believe. It's so much easier and it's so much safer to believe the accuser than give the accused the second chance and then later deal with the attack from a lawyer of, oh, you knew that this person is capable of doing this and that, and you allow them to continue working here. So the frustration comes from people who are being fired or disciplined, but usually fired for being accused of something. They have no due process rights if they work for a private company. They're completely at a mercy of an employer, and there's nothing I can do to help.
And even if if they've done an investigation and they conclude it, then I'm guessing that protects them from some of the lawsuits pending. So basically it's easier to side with the one who is being accused. Sorry, who is accusing somebody.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just
it's safer. Yes.
Safer for these people. Yeah. And you also work in personal injury. And what kind of personal injury cases generally come to you?
There's a lot of car accidents. There's a lot of slip and fall cases, which are very interesting from a legal standpoint. I think people who have never had slip and fall, they don't realize how badly you can be injured when you slip and fall on your shoulder or on your head. These are terrible injuries. Also, there is a lot of assault and battery cases. Also, battery cases between a customer of a store and security. For every 10 people who shoplift, there is one innocent person who is being attacked and tackled by the security and having their bones broken, right? So those cases are also very interesting.
Yeah, and on these personal injury stuffs, slipping and falling is always of course, it's not fun when it happens. I'm always wondering how much of that is employer's responsibility, really. Hey, I give you a railing to walk on and, you slipped and you fell. What's my responsibility here, huh?
So it doesn't necessarily happen at work. Actually, if it happens at work, it's a workers' comp issue, which is completely separate. But let me give you an example. If you walk in an aisle at Whole Foods and there is a puddle of
water,
oil spilled, and it has been there not for a minute or two, but it's been there for 4 or 5 hours. Or let's say you have a staircase at home that you're renting and you keep calling your landlord, hey, my stairway feels shaky, and they do nothing about it. And you call them and you write them letters, and then one day you fall through. Happens, right? So the degree of negligence varies. Sometimes there's no negligence and there's no case. And sometimes there is egregious disregard for every warning under the sun.
So it's a matter of degree on these kind of stuff, how much.
You have to show, it's not just, oh, I fell, I'm entitled to compensation. You have to show that whatever the reason is due to which you fell was there due to someone's negligence and failure to take action when they could and they had the opportunity to, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, I know America is a very litigious society as well, so, people sue for everything as well. I'm reminded of some of the McDonald's case where they started putting these signs on these coffee cups that it's hot after that case because somebody sued McDonald's saying, they didn't put enough warning. And it's when I see some of these signs like employees must wash hands, I know it's the right thing to do, but I would have thought everybody washes hands,
Right.
So how much of as a like you go to Europe or you go to Asia, you don't see any of these signs,
Right.
Like, so what does that tell us about us as a society? Yeah.
So there's two sides to the story. Number one, absolutely. You go to Europe, even to the most developed country, you see stairways that would never be approved here, even in Netherlands. And yes, we are more litigious in most
I mean, good work for you guys, but
what came first, the need or the work, right? Or the lawyers?
or
But
smart lawyers. One of probably they came.
who knows? But yes, the mentality in other places is you fall and you get up and you move on. You're not running to a hospital to rack up bills. On one hand. On the other hand, never trust the media describing a particular case. There is much more to McDonald's case than meets the eye. There is a reason why the jurors who deliberated on that case awarded so much. There was proof that McDonald's on purpose was overheating coffee when they were told not to do it, when they knew it was dangerous and that it causes whatever degree burn injuries. And there were documents showing that they knew, and yet they did it in order to squeeze more coffee out of whatever to increase their profits. So some of those awards come from very egregious evidence that you never get to see in the media. All you see is, somebody spilled coffee on their knee and they got $1 million. It's never that simple. Jurors are not stupid. Jurors are people like you who are sitting there in a jury and they're wondering.
Our peers, right? Our peers are sitting there looking at facts.
Yeah. So give them a little bit more credit than the media.
But they don't decide on the $1 million. I think the judge decides on the $1 million.
No, they do.
Oh, they do?
They do, yes.
Oh,
yes.
so... And how do they come up with these numbers generally?
So in part, it's your loss of wages, future and past, your medical bills, your future past, your emotional distress, which is totally out of blue air. You make a judgment call, and sometimes punitive damages to punish the other side for intentional, reckless conduct. So
right, I'm gonna end this section of employment and personal injury law by asking you, what's the most interesting personal injury case you've worked for?
a slip and fall case in an apartment building where my client had a very rich history, criminal history. He was arrested, he served time in jail, he did drugs, he drank. He just had this history of a bad boy. And the other side, the insurance company lawyers, they all thought that there's no chance he can win. They offered almost no money before trial for his injuries. And he did have a serious injury. He had screws in his foot and he was really messed up. But there's this idea that if you have criminal history, if you did some bad things in the past, DUIs, then the jury is not going to like you and you're not going to get anything out of them. And that case turned out to be surprisingly well for me. The jury awarded significant amount to that plaintiff. And this was a reminder to me that you can never look at a person like that, just, one thing, he has this conviction, jury is not going to like him. You got to look at the whole picture. Does it come across as likable right now, today, in front of the jury? Does it come across as a person who is genuine, who has really been injured? Or is he full of himself and he's entitled?
Or is conning the system?
Conning the system, things that the world owes him. If the jury doesn't like you right then and there, if they're annoyed by you, if they find you obnoxious and entitled, it's going to be very hard for them to give you money. But if you come across as a nice person, hardworking person who doesn't exaggerate what happened to him, despite your past, they can overlook the past and treat you fairly.
Yeah, Americans are very forgiving that way, you know.
Especially if you recognize. We don't see enough sorries. We don't see enough remorse.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole Christian nation and concept too, where redemption is rewarded in America.
Politicians don't apologize enough. Boyfriends and girlfriends don't apologize enough. Employees and their managers don't apologize enough. Make apology great again.
Yeah, but I think, especially on the employer-employee side, that would lead them to a lot of legal trouble. So, because they'll record an apology and take you to court. Huh?
That's true too.
Well, on that note, we'll end the first segment of our conversation with Arkady. We'll come back after a small break. Well, welcome to the second segment of our conversation with Arkady. So, Arkady, you are a Russian, Israeli, American citizen?
Correct.
So you have 3 passports?
Correct.
Right. So you were born in Russia and you grew up in Israel?
Correct.
When did you move there? And
when I was 11.
Love it. And then you spent teenage years there and then came to San Francisco.
When I was 21, correct.
Got it. So and then so you have this unique perspective of being in, various war zones, current war zones, I'm guessing. So how and you go back to? Do you go back to Israel often?
I used to go back every 3-4 months. My mom still lives there. I don't go to Russia as often, but I do go every few years. But I've been mostly going back to Israel.
And you have some family in Russia as well, or
No family in Russia, but my mom still lives in Israel.
Israel?
Yeah.
Okay. How are since you go back to Israel, you to every 3-4 months. How's it back there? When you go back? I mean, as a commoner going back and forth. How is it? I mean, now that you compare it to San Francisco, let's say.
I've been traveling around, obviously, Europe and many other places. And I don't think I'm saying it just because I grew up there. I do think that Israel is a one-of-a-kind place with one-of-a-kind vibe, one-of-a-kind energy, and a unique one-of-a-kind combination of an amazing beach, amazing nightlife, an amount of good-looking young people everywhere, one-of-a-kind food, one-of-a-kind concerts, parties, whether it's trance parties, whether it's Arabic parties. And there's so much good. The media only shows 10% of the bad and the awful, but there's so much good. Is it a cheap place? No. It's Jews. It's not going to be cheap, right? So it's an expensive place. You have to spend a lot of money, but it's still on my top list.
You have friends and family living. How's life there as a commoner?
I think life is difficult. It's expensive. It's stressful. Not only because of the politics, but people are pushy. They're not the sweetest people in the world. You do have to push your way through to get things done, and there is a lot of hustle and bustle. As a tourist, you enjoy the vibrance, but I am sure that along with very hot and humid weather in summer, the cost of living, the politics. It gets stressful and tiring, I'm sure.
And now you live in San Francisco. How do you you go back? When you go back, you stay mostly in Tel Aviv, or do you go out, venture to other parts of Israel, or?
So I stay mostly in Tel Aviv. I always spend a day or two in Jerusalem. I think it's important because it's such a different place. It's like yin and yang. It's only 45 minutes away by bus, but I don't feel like my trip is complete. I also try to stop over in one of the nearby countries in Europe, and I always tell people, if you have a connection in a good place, if you're already there, you might as well stay there for a few days. Right?
Yeah.
So.
And how do you compare, let's say, Tel Aviv to San Francisco in certain regards?
So this is such a painful topic because so often when I'm in Tel Aviv, I'm thinking about San Francisco of late 90s. And early 2000s. So many people are still out. They dress like late 90s, early 2000s. They're still standing in line in clubs. They're still, talking to each other in person. They still go out so much more. They still like trance music, which it seems like it's out of style here. They still like breakdancing. They still like sneakers that here are completely out of style right now. So it's like, in a way, it's like going back to the late 90s, early 2000s of San Francisco, and I really appreciate it.
And anything else with respect? I mean, are there homeless people there, like in San Francisco? Probably.
You would see a couple, one or two sleeping down the very downtown, but really not much. Yeah.
And between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, it's a religious place, but the vibe is different.
The vibe is very different. Of course, there are a lot of religious people in Jerusalem. It's by no means, Riyadh in Saudi Arabia or anything like that. But yes, it's not a beach town. It feels more serious. People are more covered. There is this aura of history. The buildings are much older, but it is also a much more upscale city. It's maintained much better because many parts of Tel Aviv look like they've been bombed, even though they haven't, right? So it's a different vibe, but it's an equally important vibe. That's why I would say anybody who goes there If you go to Jerusalem, you got to make sure you go to Tel Aviv. If you go to Tel Aviv, go to Jerusalem, along with, the north and the south when things get better.
And with all of the stuff going on, and you being a Russian, Israeli, American citizen, what do you make of the conflict that's happening in Israel and Gaza right now?
For me, it's a very painful conflict for a very specific reason. I find that region to be, and the people to be, so uniquely amazing. For that region to have so much to offer, so much warmth, so much hospitality, so much kindness, so many amazing, from food and shisha to music, and there's so much flavor to that place. And the fact that all this is going on there is particularly painful. There are different ways to look at it. You can call it terrorism, extremism. You can call it genocide and oppression of the people who have been occupied for a long time. Someone very knowledgeable yesterday, who I spoke with yesterday, who came from Bahrain, reduced it all to money. Take away the money from people who cause problems, and the problems will stop. Maybe they have a point. I do want to say that at least Israelis are very open-minded. They understand different perspectives. They understand that more than one thing can be true at the same time. There could be some injustices toward Palestinians that need to be addressed. And there's also horrible atrocities that have been committed toward Israel for many years, culminating with October 7. I just wish it resolved. And it's been going for too long. And I hope that America will show that it's a superpower by taking charge and fixing it once and for all.
Yeah, I mean, you can trace back all these issues back to the French and the British, and back in the and the World Wars, and the Sykes-Picot Agreement dividing up Palestine, and the Zionism and all that. But yeah, somebody interestingly mentioned, it takes 3 generations to forget about a conflict. Apparently, like the ones who came to Israel in 1940, whenever the independence was, to, I don't know, has it been 3 generations yet? Probably not yet.
No.
Yeah, because the wounds are fresh, and imagine either you're one of the families whose kid or got killed in the October 7th attack, or one of the Gazan families that got, in the way of the Israeli army attack. You think they're going to forget about these things and move on? And
I think they will move on faster than you can imagine if this conflict stops being fueled by extremists and by injection of money. If you notice, even in San Francisco, every movement, every protest is not organic. It's fueled by outside influence, outside money. Why is it that we have protests for Gaza and not protests for Ukraine, for Syria, even for Lebanon? I saw a protest, Gaza-related protest the other day. Not a single sign about Lebanon. People are dying there right now from Israeli attacks on Hezbollah. Nothing. You only see protests when they're being paid for. That's the reality.
And the same who do you think is paying this?
Many people blame George Soros. If it's not him, it's people like him. Maybe it's an outside, maybe Qataris, maybe Iran. They're interested in causing unrest and showing that the world is against Israel. There is no way that the people who live near encampments, homeless encampments, for decades, near an open drug market, and they never make any noise about it. There is no way that on their own they were organized and come out and marching on Market Street screaming globalize intifada. There's just no chance.
Sometimes I get to think, do people, when you go back, talk to friends, and how did we get here on all of this stuff? Do people have a perspective on that kind of stuff? And
so it never really stops. Peace in Israel is a couple of stabbings a week, a few rockets here and there, right? It was never truly peaceful, but somehow it was tolerated because we thought there is a fringe, extreme cartel type group that, engages in terrorism. But overall, things were okay. How did we get here? Some people say that Hamas saw that there is a division within Israel and they wanted to take advantage of it. Others say
There's
that
all the judge issues with Netanyahu and
judicial reform,
yeah,
exactly.
it was a split nation at that time.
Exactly. Others say that they really didn't want Saudi Arabia to make peace with Israel because there's a lot going on under the surface where Saudis and Israelis work to expand the Abraham Accords and everything. So I can only speculate.
Yeah, yeah. And on the judicial reform, what's your take on that? I know it's like all scrapped right now, but was it good for Israel or was it bad? Or
You know, I can't help but feel that just like we have Trump derangement syndrome here, there is a Bibi derangement syndrome in Israel. There's a group of people who are considered the elite, the academics, the left, the Israeli left wing, who just hate Bibi. And I'm not sure exactly why. Is it really because he got a couple of bottles of champagne and maybe $100,000 in gifts from someone for something that appears to be some type of corruption? I really don't understand. But every time I go to Israel and I ask, okay, you're not happy with what Bibi is doing. What would you like for him to do? Nobody has an answer. What would be a better way? Nobody has an answer. Oh, he just got a result. He just got to bring the hostages back. How? What is, how? Isn't he trying? I have no idea. Judicial reform, you know, there's two ways to look at it. It's a balance. And some people, just like here you have the left and right, some people are screaming that the courts are legislating from the bench and they're all ultra-liberal and they're crazy leftist. And then you have others that say that government should not be interfering with the independence of judiciary. So two sides, like to every...
yeah, and I mean, right now one side is clearly sort of winning. And you gave a suggestion on like America should play a heavier part in this to end it. Is that how you think this is going to end? What do you think?
I'm much more optimistic about Russia-Ukraine conflict ending because there is no religious aspect there. There is no terrorism. There is no extremism. It's a geopolitical conflict, and Putin is very pragmatic, no matter what they say about him. That conflict can be resolved in one day. Israel-Palestine conflict, I tend to agree with the people who I spoke with Bahrain. You got a strong arm, everybody with money. You're not getting any more aid if you continue this. I don't care if you die from humanitarian crisis. You don't get any more aid if you don't make some concessions and make some good things happen.
So like money is sort of forcing function in a lot of these things.
Yep.
Yeah. With your ties to, Russia, I mean, being born there, what do you make of the Russia-Ukraine conflict right now? Or it's been going on for like a couple of years.
It's time to put an end to it. As we know, this is completely unforgivable, by the way, for America to continue to drag this along and to fuel this war when we all know that a deal could have been made 2 months into this war and the NATO agreements have been violated by America and America was pushing Russia toward this. And unless it's all for military-industrial complex, it's completely unforgivable. You bring everyone to the table just like at a divorce court. Ukraine will have to give up significant land. In exchange, they will get some protections and some security guarantees. Russia will have to make some concessions too. I think both sides are ready to make these concessions. The people are ready to make these concessions. Just got to stop fueling this with money and with weapons. You're never going to get back to before the conflict, right? Russia is not going to give back land that they conquered with the blood of their soldiers. They're going to give some of it, not all of it.
Yeah. But that's the thing, right? They're probably going to go back to the 2014 Crimea. They want now. I mean, earlier they were not super gung-ho about Crimea. Now they want the Crimea back too.
The world should forget about Crimea. It's not going back to anybody, no matter what. The world should forget about Donetsk and Luhansk, those republics that already declared independence. The longer you wait, the more Russia advances, the harder it will be to negotiate with Russia, and understandably so.
You think this is gonna? What do you think? Like Donald Trump and his team is gonna do? He said he's gonna end it in 24 hours.
It's so easy. You come to Zelensky, who is probably already ready to make a deal. Not giving you any more weapons. Without weapons, Ukraine is done like immediately. you're coming to the table and we make a reasonable deal, not a perfect deal. Come to Putin, say, come on, man, sanctions, your people, all these limitations, your currency. Come on, we can put an end to it, make you come out with dignity. You can make it look like a victory, even if it's not a victory. We can lift the sanctions. We can reopen your consulate and embassy. We can connect you back to SWIFT. We can give you so many things. If you can just retreat from those specific lands that are very important to Ukraine, we're guaranteeing neutrality for this part of Ukraine, blah, blah, blah. He can sweeten up the pot for Putin to make him, because Putin is very pragmatic. He's not like, oh, I'm going to fight just for the sake of fighting. He's not like that. He wants to make a deal.
Yeah. So, in the you have some family in Russia. So
No.
You don't have any. So friends or like anybody you talk to about these conflicts back in the back there, or
I do. So we do have a condo there in which I was born. We never sold it. I do talk to people, but they have a completely different perspective. We're under the attack by the West. This is our existential war. They're all attacking us with sanctions, with boycotts, with propaganda, and they feel like the whole world is ganging up on them.
against Russia. Yeah, because I was talking to a friend. This is start of the conflict, 2022. And in Russia, I think they do take in the bus, like how we have the Muni card where you do NFC payments. And they were trying to do the payments and it didn't work because they cut off from the financial system. So like the PayPals didn't work and all of that. So some of them are feeling the impact of these sanctions
Right.
in the real life, basically.
Now they're big enough to afford
Yeah.
not caring so much, and they built their own stuff, and they can work with India and China and Iran and Emirates. So it's in Africa and Latin America. So most of the world actually didn't cut them off, but it certainly doesn't help to have a terrible relationship with Europe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Europe is still buying a bunch of its gas, so it's a love-hate relationship,
Right.
I would say, huh? So being of Russian-Israeli descent in America, do you get some funny looks sometimes in terms of now, especially with all these stuff going on, especially out here in the liberal West and or Commons and all that? How do you? What's the scene that you generally?
So, I noticed that the current thing lasts for about a year and a half. So first I was given a hard time for not wearing masks everywhere and not getting vaccinated. Then people were arguing with me about, Russia invading in Ukraine. Okay, now it's Gaza. I mean, I let the dogs bark. If they bark very loudly, I don't have to bark back.
Yeah. And with sort of the geopolitics aspect, I mean, for the areas you care about in the world, what do you think is going to happen with the new election and new sort of government and I think, White House, Congress?
I'm very optimistic that there's going to be change because we need change, even if the Trump administration ends one war, let alone two wars. Even if because we know exactly what would have happened. If Harris was elected, the same thing would be going on. More money, more war, more people dying in Ukraine and Russia. If they can just finish that one thing alone, I would be happy. My vote didn't go for nothing. And there are some competent people. I don't mind if billionaires, for a change, take charge, and if highly accomplished people take charge, not because of the color of their skin, but because of how much they accomplished. Let's see what they can make happen.
And what are you what are you most skeptical about that won't happen, let's say, in this administration?
I'm always skeptical about people who are overselling. Someone like Trump comes up and says, within 24 hours, I'm going to do
I'm going
all
to
of
build a
this.
wall in 36 hours.
I'm going to deport 12 million people.
You
Really?
think that's going to happen?
Really? Come on. I'm going to do all this. If you're over-promising, make unrealistic promises, this makes me question everything. But I'm hoping that he's going to do a few of the very important and very significant things, and it's going to make his presidency worth it despite all the drama and all the circus that we surely are going to see.
Yeah. And probably end this segment by asking you, what's your sort of, coming back to being a Israeli citizen here in San Francisco, I see a lot of the Israeli-Palestinian sort of hate everywhere in this country. I mean, one side versus the other. Yeah, where do you think that's gonna go, and what's your hope on that issue?
I'm just hoping that it's gonna die down, and people will move on to the next thing. It's very painful for me. I work on Montgomery and Post, and right then and there, I've seen so many protests. Fuck Israel. Fuck Zionists. Death to Israel. Death to IDF. Death to the Jews. From the river to the sea. It's very painful, and it's a little bit scary to know that you're surrounded by people who at least pretend to care so much. But like they say, this too shall pass. And I really hope that it will. And I think the next thing is going to be the deportations, because they already put the fencing around the INS. So hopefully this will be a distraction, and that'll be the next current thing. We'll see.
The next deportations. Yeah, that's going to be a big change. Well, on that note, thanks for the second segment. We'll come back after a quick break. Welcome to the third segment of our conversation with Arkady. We are in San Francisco, so we're going to talk about San Francisco and tech that goes along with it. So as a long-time resident of San Francisco, where do you think San Francisco is today? Over these years, and we have seen, and COVID.
My memories of walking down very busy streets with tons of people who are dressed up, guys in business clothes, women in pencil skirts, with briefcases, and my memories of seeing lines of girls in mini dresses standing outside clubs, and everybody being drunk from Thursday to Sunday. They are haunting me every day still when I come out after work on Post Street or Market, and I see so many for lease signs, and the streets are half empty, and 8 p.m. feels like 3 in the morning. It bothers me. I'm very nostalgic about the early 2000s. I don't know.
That's
what
when
to
you
say.
ended up coming to San Francisco.
Late 90s, yes.
Late
yes.
90s.
Yes.
So in the late 90s, there was that and the .com boom, and then stuff happened, 9/11 and Iraq war and financial crisis and all of that, and then COVID. Like you've seen the ebbs and flows. You particularly, did not like San Francisco during COVID. How was your COVID in San Francisco?
I was very frustrated, and with all the lockdowns, all the restrictions. For me, by far the most outrageous and the most surprising thing was reaction or lack of reaction. I always thought that people who are ready to kill you when you drive down the street and you cut them off, who are honking at you like crazies, people who are used to the best restaurants, who travel, who go to Napa for wine tasting and Tahoe, you're gonna tell them not to go out or to stand outside Whole Foods in line to go into grocery store, and they're not gonna fight back, they're not gonna protest, they're not gonna cause rioting? Are you kidding me? I was really surprised that there was absolutely no resistance. Maybe 10% of the population very quietly packed and moved to Texas, to Florida, maybe to East Sacramento, wherever. The lack of outrage and the acquiescence to everything for as long as it takes, for a reason or no reason whatsoever, really, really bothered me. And I think I learned something that I wish I never learned about the people here. I don't think it's as simple as left and right, but maybe.
What did you learn about the people?
That they're not curious enough, they're not asking enough questions, they're not fighting back when they should, they don't use their tools and their rights when they should, they're not really patriotic about San Francisco. I thought people are going to say, this is the best city in America, we're going to defend it, we're not going to let businesses just perish because of the lockdowns. Half of us are going to be open. Screw you, we don't care about your rules. You're not enforcing anything anyway. I'm just going to open and I'm going to continue doing business and selling. No, nothing. Everybody fell in line, at least here in San Francisco. And that was very disappointing to me.
It's not the counterculture you thought it was rule-abiding culture, technically.
If your counterculture is surface level and it doesn't go beneath blue hair and nose ring and a bunch of tattoos, it's not really a counterculture.
So you would have expected them to not shut businesses, but then people had to do that by, I don't know, not getting COVID, I'm guessing.
I expected some percentage of non-compliance and of some percentage, because I have seen it in Southern California, that some bars are open. They're like, we don't care. Some gyms are open. Here, 100% zombie compliance. For as long as it takes. 3 months is fine. 6 months is fine. A year? A year and a half? Are you kidding me?
Yeah. And what do you think about the people saying San Francisco's gone to dogs and the doom and gloom that has been in the media for the last couple of years?
You know, a lot of people like to oversimplify it. I don't think it's as simple as crime and homelessness and drugs. Streets are not that dirty right now. It's not that dangerous. Yes, there's drug addicts and homeless, but they're all in one area. I think there's a deeper cultural reasons for why San Francisco is where it is today. I think it's tech, more specifically, people staying at home more. They spend a lot of time ordering food in, watching movies and streaming movies and games, dating from home, making videos from home. And I think it's a cultural thing, because there are a lot of dangerous places in Latin America and the rest of the world, and they're bustling and people are out and they're like, okay, crime exists. I'm not buying it that it's as simple as, if we clean up the streets and if we make it more safe, then our streets are going to be filled up until 3 a.m. again. Like, I don't think so.
They'd also need to change policies on when bars and restaurants can be open till and all of that, and maybe that'll change some of the... I know there's some policies. I think Scott Wiener was coming up with some policy on hanging out late in the night. We can research and look it up. With the new mayor incoming, new administration also in the local government in the city, are you hopeful? But where do you think? Do you think this will shift the homelessness and open air drug markets and all of that?
So my hope is that somebody who spends $6 or $8 million of their own money is motivated, very, very motivated, to do something amazing. It's going to take time. It's going to take years, even if you do everything right. On the other hand, I keep hearing stories that he's part of the machine, he's part of the establishment, his wife is connected somehow to whatever, Newsom's office, whatever. So I want to see more of Trump in our mayor, in a sense, more energy, more angst. Like, I want to make a difference.
Shake things up.
Exactly. I don't see that in him, but just because he doesn't show it in his demeanor doesn't mean it's not inside him. I would like to give him time and chance, for sure.
So it's a change. It's a change in the city. AI is booming. Everything is AI, and a lot of people are saying San Francisco is still the AI capital of the world, and San Francisco is coming back. AI is coming because of AI. Do you get to work with like the tech co-founders and the tech people, and what capacity do you generally meet them? Legal capacities or?
So I, of course, review the operative documents when people start, or I draft or I review documents when people create a business or a startup. Also, when there's a dispute, when one of the founders or one of the managing officers decides to leave, what are the fair terms of departure? What are the fair terms of disbanding or liquidating that business? It's not always clear what the fair terms are, especially if the documents are ambiguous and people have different expectations and they feel that they contributed more and therefore they should be receiving more. There are a lot of layoffs, so I review severance agreements and I advise people whether they have any leverage to negotiate higher severance. Some people think about resigning. Is this because so many people are thinking about, and maybe it included you at some point, I'm done with working for this company. I want to start my own thing. 3 months from now, 6 months from now? When is the right time? On what terms? And how do I exit with maximum benefits? What's going to happen to my unvested stock options? Can I accelerate them? What about my health insurance? Can I get more severance? What do I do with my next venture? Right? So I pride myself on providing not only legal but practical advice. It's easy to talk about theory, but I'm trying to put myself in my client's shoes. How old are they? What is
Are
the
these folks in like their 20s or 30s or like
all kinds?
bros with hoodies or with a
All kinds. I have to ask them, what are your goals? Are you planning to become a nomad? Did you already start a new company? Are you working for 2 companies at the same time and you're afraid to get in trouble? Do you want to fight the other side because you really feel they screwed you and they stole this incredible business idea from you? What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? And based on that, we're going to tailor our legal strategy to that.
And what's the general complaint you get from the tech co-founders here?
So one common
company?
complaint is you have 2 friends who've known each other forever. One is a marketing guy, the other one is an engineer. One is a product guy, the other is a sales guy. And of course, when you're friends, you expect so much from each other, and then somehow one of them is disappointed in how they're being treated. And ironically, the closer you are to someone, the more it hurts and the more betrayed you feel when you're disappointed. And then that disappointment translates into trying to sue for whatever they can to take revenge for that disappointment. And then I have to work on that situation. Do we have legal basis for suing? Or should I calm down that client and say, don't waste your time and energy. Your best revenge is doing that other thing and succeeding in that other venture. Right? So that is one common issue. The other common issue is that some companies do go after.
And what do you just before we go in?
Sure.
What do you tell those people to? Then there are buddies who start working on a company, and then 6 months down the line they've figured something out, and now it's valuable. But now they're trying to figure everything out legally and all of that. What do you recommend? Good practices for co-founders to, just protect each other. Like good fences make good neighbors sometimes, right?
Number 1, make sure that your initial documents, your operative documents, are clear and unambiguous. Just because you think the document means something doesn't mean that that's what it means to the other person. Have an attorney review for any vaguenesses and ambiguity. Most contract disputes occur not because people want to screw each other over, but because they understood different things from the same language. That's number 1. Number 2, if you have a disagreement, do not become nasty to each other. Do not throw low blows. It doesn't help to be mean, to be an asshole. And if you have a small company, do not start this barrage of nasty text message and emails. Focus on this type of conversation more. You would be surprised how many issues you can resolve like this rather than sending nasty or passive-aggressive threats and emails. I think people should talk more often in a live conversation.
So they should have an operating agreement. They should. Is that like a standard template you could download?
No. So
you have to draft
everything has to be customized, just like this conversation is customized. Do you have a template for me today? No. You sat down based on what you know about me, and you handwritten your notes based on what you know about me. If you're starting a $100 million company or what you think is going to be a $100 million company, you should not be using a $30 template from Kinko's. And if you do, you can start from that. But somebody else, this is not the time to save a few $100s. Somebody else should review it and fix it for you.
And then the second issue, the first one is the people feel slighted for their, value not being had. What the other issues you find with the tech?
The other issue I see when people leave a startup, they try to take their customers with them, or they say, come and work with me and with this new company because this company sucks and I'm going to have a better company. Or engineers, they hoping, I'm going to take this code, which is very unique, which I built for this company, and I am going to start a new company hoping that this company is not going to notice that I'm using the same code. But once this other company starts losing money and they see that somebody takes the bread off their table, they're going to try to look who to blame. And then you do see companies go after their former employees for misappropriation of trade secrets, stealing customer lists, stealing proprietary information. So you got to be very careful with that. And if that is coupled with some personal animosity between the employee who left and the management, all hell can break loose.
And how can companies generally prove that you've done it, or people prove that they've not done it? Huh?
Well,
is there a trail generally?
Well, I'm not an engineer, but I don't think it's that hard to show that the code is suspiciously similar. Or
Code compare.
Yeah, code compare, if it looks like plagiarism. Or that, you could subpoena emails and text messages and Slack messages to show that, you've been contacting the same customers and then talking to those customers and asking them to testify about what happened. It's actually not that hard to prove.
And the courts will grant you with a reasonable sort of doubt on these kind of stuff, on discovery, subpoena and all that.
Yeah, most of these cases settle. But yeah, discovery can be very unpleasant. It's expensive. But the companies who go after employees, if they're angry enough, they're going to spare no expense.
And are there more companies going after employees, or employees going after companies in these instances?
I think employees go after companies way more often. It's not that common for companies to go after employees, but when it happens, it's ugly. I always recommend employees put your principles aside. Instead, if you didn't do anything wrong, be an open book. Guys, I didn't take anything. Would you like me to show you something that would assure you? Because a lot of companies are paranoid about their trade secrets. Let me calm you down. Let me put your mind to rest. Tell me what I can show you so that you will know that I didn't do anything wrong. If you really didn't do anything wrong, this is the cheapest and the easiest way. So,
and also a lot of companies don't want to look at your code, because then they're like, oh, we are now looking at your code, so now we are in trouble.
potentially.
So they will probably not take that offer up, I think. If you that would be their lawyer's advice, I think.
Absolutely.
Right? And these co-founders, generally, if they have disputes, do they end up settling this, or does it go to some courts, or how does it work generally?
So most cases settle. Many of them go through some ugly, time-consuming, expensive litigation. Let's take an extreme example of Zuckerberg against this other guy. We know what happened there, how many millions of dollars went back and forth. Let's take Apple and Microsoft. How many times they've sued each other for trademark infringement, and you used my screen on an iPhone, but Samsung used their chip, or some other company's chip. You see these stories go back and forth. So it looks like, just like in family court, people have to beat each other up, just like in war, in politics, just like in personal disputes. People have to beat each other up and spend some money before they're ready to talk settlement. It seems like there's no way around it.
What do you think, that you're living in San Francisco and now you're working with tech founders, what has tech done to San Francisco? The good, bad, and the ugly.
I don't feel comfortable blaming tech for as many things as others blame it, that it's all monotone, it's boring. I do agree that the only type of conversations I hear around is about tech and product manager and user experience, and it gets really annoying. I prefer to hear about people's dating problems, relationship issues, personal gossip.
You're a personal dating coach too, right? Which
used to be. That's in my long past. Yes. Yeah. But are techies the ones that commit crimes? Are they the ones who litter? Are they the ones who inject fentanyl? Are they the ones that engage in shoplifting and looting and rioting? I don't think so. Also, Tel Aviv has a lot of tech. I don't think it hurts Tel Aviv that much. Some people say, and I agree, that not all engineers are alike. There's much more to these people than being engineers. So I don't like that there's only one industry here, that people who come here, they don't do what they want, but they do what they have to pay rent until they can afford doing what they really want. So that doesn't help. So we do need to diversify. I've gone to a few house parties recently, and every single person is in tech. And when I go to the bathroom and I come back, they all talk about
Tech, yeah.
about tech.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people say. Like in certain places like New York, and there's more diversity of conversation. I mean, of course, there's finance and there's Broadways and this and that, but there's a lot. I mean, there's more people also in New York. But of course, I mean, there are pockets. You go to Paris. People talk about food. People talk about luxury fragrances. So nobody talks about. I mean, tech. There's upcoming tech there now, but there's also lack of conversation about tech. Let's say in LA, for example, if you go. But yeah, I mean, from a San Francisco perspective, it's always there's real estate tech. There is construction tech. There is like everything has a tech associated with it. So the good and bad, basically, right? So, dating profiles and dating coaching. So, how did you get into that stuff that you're doing before?
Like many people, I was inspired by my own challenges and my own discoveries. Much of my advice is grossly outdated right now.
Okay, this is back when you were in the scene.
All right, back when people, when men's heart was jumping out because they're so nervous to pick up the phone and call a girl, right?
Who calls anymore? Huh?
Exactly. So that advice is over. Who is approaching anybody anymore? At least in San Francisco, who is even looking at anybody?
It's all on the apps. Huh?
You had articles about eye contact, how important it is. Who is making eye contact with anyone anymore?
Yeah.
No one, right? So, a lot of my advice is
for back in the day when people were
dating.
dating.
No.
But I think how do you, other than putting stuff on the app, how do you think this whole situation has changed now? Huh?
I think it's very unique in San Francisco, this reliance generally on apps for everything, for ordering food, for dating. In other places, including Israel and Europe, people still do approach each other. Here, I just can't imagine. Like, if you come up to a girl now, she's not even gonna know, like, what's going on? Why are you talking to me, right? Not to mention that they look so scared. I don't know if San Francisco is really that scary. But one thing I would say, I've been looking at different dating profiles and people post their exchange. I wish that people who went to Harvard and Princeton and Yale, they put their supposed eloquence to use and try to at least impress their potential mates with the way they write. And I see the opposite. Low effort profiles, low effort. Hey, how are you? What's up? What are you doing? How is your weekend? There's a conspiracy. That's the only thing they can say. How is your day? How is your weekend? Really? You have nothing else to say, huh? As somebody who has a master's from whatever, from Berkeley, you really cannot do any better than that? Apparently no one cares. That's good enough.
Or they just look at the photos and then swipe, and is that how people are getting people?
I just see, if I could zoom out for a moment, I see low effort behavior in way too many aspects of life. In dating, even in restaurants. You mentioned you're a foodie. The service we get in most places today is not the service that America became famous for. It's half-ass. In most restaurants, they mess up your orders. They don't know what they're doing. It's not at the level that it used to be. You see it in dating. You see it in the way people speak, in the way people dress up. I'm guilty as charged too, in their style. So I think there's some kind of apathy, post-COVID apathy, that we still didn't fully emerge from. There's still this lethargy and apathy in the air in San Francisco, more so than in other places, that we need to emerge out of.
And is that more of, hey, I'm too cool for school and this is what you get attitude, or is it more of the famous Steve Jobs quote that you have always told this to some of the people when back in the Apple days they used to say, keep your ties at home, bring your brains to work. So it's a little bit of a brainy location, or like you think that plays a part in sort of how people approach life?
I know for a fact that the first thing that you mentioned, too cool for school, I know for a fact from several people that I know how they behave. I make $1 million for working 1 hour a week.
So I can afford to wear shorts on my dating profile.
And I am the shit.
Yeah.
I am God's gift to this world. I don't need to say anything except sup to a
Sup.
girl, and she's
Yeah.
gonna fall over me. And guess what? She's not.
Yeah, because there are other people making $1 million here.
Yeah, and it takes a little bit more. It's not all about money and the love and attraction and spark and connection. It's a much more complex equation than what you look like and how much money you make. But definitely the first thing that you mentioned, I'm too cool for school. I don't need to prove anything to anyone except that I want to show that I don't need to prove anything to anyone. They play a significant role. Yeah.
Yeah, and with have you? I mean, we can't talk about San Francisco without talking about AI. What's your sort of take on all of this in your profession and what you see with your friends and all that?
I'm going to plagiarize the word of NVIDIA CEO. Don't be afraid of AI. Use it to your advantage. People who are going to be left behind are not the ones who are using AI. It's only going to benefit them, like many other things, like scanner benefited you in a keyboard instead of typewriter, and a car and not a horse. All of these things helped us and propelled us. Work with AI. Don't ignore it. Don't act like it doesn't exist. The people who will be left behind are the ones that are pushing it away and don't give it a chance. I would like to believe that the NVIDIA guy knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, success breeds success, hopefully. But and I think I do find a lot of his comments very unique and very timely, like how he basically has instead of a lot of CEOs have maybe 5 to 10 reports, he has 60. So he's a flat hierarchy in his company, and there's
That's
like
amazing.
many things that are unique about
I also
about him.
think that all these overachievers like him and Musk, luck is about 10%. 90% is talent and hard work and making the right decisions. So we should listen to those people more.
Yeah,
And
what,
don't
what do you
just-
what do you think about Musk with his newfound, co-president role in Trump administration and other stuff?
I admire the originality. I admire this revolutionary spirit of trying to shake things up. I'm very optimistic about his role. Is it going to make mistakes? Of course. Are some things that he's going to make will have to be reverted back because they were not good ideas? Possibly. But I think the net benefit from his ideas, from his talent, are going to far outweigh any downsides. And we've never had people like this in charge, making decisions like him, like Vivek. And it will be very interesting to see what they can do.
I was reading this tweet from Vivek about DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, and I think one of the first things they're trying to do is to have an app for filing our taxes. I think that would be cool. Like personally, we have an app for everything in life.
I don't know why we don't have an app for voting. There would be so many benefits to eliminate waiting, to have full transparency, to eliminate any doubt, to just
For that one,
streamline.
I've heard that people have not prevented a hack-proof way for them to
But we do
prevent
everything.
North Korea from hacking your election and stuff.
But what
like
about
that,
we transact billions of dollars every day? DMV, Social Security, banking, everything is online.
This is the most sacred of duties
I
in a
suppose.
society. So but this is the last to go. I mean, still there's voting machines, which is technically digital. It's just not on an app. So what's your sort of future vision? Are you San Francisco lifer? Are you gonna go spend your retired years in Israel or back to Russia? Or like, what's your deal?
So, under the risk of sounding like a big hypocrite, despite all of my complaints about
Yeah.
San Francisco, I still appreciate the many good things that it has. I've been here for a long time. I am not a big fan of moving unless I really, really, really have to. I also have a secret, maybe naive, but pretty strong hope that we will witness a magical revival, a magical renaissance for San Francisco, and that hope keeps me going. That, along with what many other people do, traveling all the time to happier pastures, maybe more interesting, more stimulating pastures, getting the oxygen of energy and motivation and then coming back, keeps me going. It's not a terrible place by any means that some people make it to be. I would tell anyone who hears horror stories about San Francisco not to believe a word. Just come, judge for yourself. Like any other place, there's a lot of good things. There's some bad things. I do want the empty, vacant retail spaces to be filled up. I don't want to be surrounded by for lease signs. This is very close to me for some reason. It really bothers me. It's a sign of some kind of illness of a city. So if we can
Yeah,
feel
you can
that,
find some of those when you go to Detroit or some of the old cities of the East where there's a ghost cities for like 50, 60 years.
and on that note, I don't like this mindset. Oh, San Francisco always comes back. Things don't happen on their own. It
Yeah,
takes a
it has
lot of
to.
work. Did Detroit come back? Maybe partially, not fully. Look at Oakland. Is Oakland ever going to come back? That downtown is decimated, right? Good things do not happen by themselves. They require a lot of work, a lot of right decisions, and a lot of time.
Yeah. I mean, my hope is that as long as the city, I think, few things, have good colleges, the nature around the area, smart people moving here. I mean, it becomes a good ecosystem, thriving ecosystem for people to come back to. And then with the good people, they want to live, companies set up shop here. So it's a virtuous cycle sometimes. I'm a big fan of San Francisco. I'm running this show from San Francisco as well. So, well, on that note, San Francisco is back, baby.
One more observation. I have an Israeli friend who comes and visits here every now and then. And we were sitting at Blue Bottle downtown. And he says, do you see this cafe? Like, yes. He says, this is what San Francisco is. It's a conference room. I don't want it to be a conference room. I want it to be a cool lounge with a big dense area, with a big lounging area where people can mingle and maybe even make out, with a little workspace on the side. I just don't want it to be a conference room.
Yeah,
That's all.
On that beautiful note, we'll end our segment and show with Arkady. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.